much for being here with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for inviting us on.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and a quick overview of Central Florida Jobs with Justice?
Yeah, my name is Sam Delgado. I'm a programs coordinator with Central Florida Jobs with Justice. And so, we're a coalition of organizations, so both social justice, community based organizations, as well as local labor unions. We basically try to make the space for these organizations to convene and talk about work issues that are impacting workers and what can be done at the local level, state, and federal levels to help make a better environment for workers' rights and the capacity for collective bargaining.
How does it tie labor, community, and climate justice together?
Well, yeah, they're really very intimately related issues, right? Where we have this constantly changing environment, right? We're seeing increasing heat. We're seeing the impacts of hurricanes here in Central Florida, and our lives are governed by what we have to do in order to meet our basic needs, right? And so much of that is done at the workplace. And so, the context of our work environment is governed by, different decision makers, whether that be the employer, our local and state government regulations. And so, when it comes down to the impacts of workers from climate change, there's a lot of different questions that have to be answered. So recently, for instance, we just did an assessment of workers throughout the county on how climate change is impacting them in order to help identify some of those ways that, whether it be the employers or local government or state government, that we can find what are the protections that people need, in order to be able to work.
How do labor rights and climate justice intersect, and why is this connection so crucial in today's world?
Yeah, so when it comes to climate justice and labor rights, we see that workers will often be left out unless they're forced into the conversation, right? Because the decision makers will so often be focused mostly on their own private profits. And so when it comes to the transition to renewable technologies, for instance, we have a lot of conversations about, well, let's get electric buses, let's get electric vehicles out on the streets, and not sufficient conversations about affordability, about who are the workers that are adapting to these systems that are supposed to help us mitigate the impacts of climate change. And so, where there is a tie-in is that there's a need to have intentional planning to make sure that workers are at the table of the decisions that are being made on our behalf. And so, when it comes to electrifying the fleet of like buses, we want to make sure that those are unionized workers driving those buses, that those are unionized workers who are, doing the mechanical work on the buses, for instance, and that basically, as we transition to be able to meet the needs of our society as it will be impacted by climate change, that there are people representing workers at every step of that transition.
Can you tell us about a specific initiative that successfully demonstrates this intersectionality in action here in Central Florida?
Yeah, so in collaboration with ATU 1596, we worked with them to make sure that in the transition of the Lynx fleet to electrical, that their workers would be represented by a union and wouldn't be basically replaced by contractors who already have the licensing to work on electrical buses. And so that's one example.
What challenges have you encountered in promoting equitable climate justice, and how have you overcome them?
So I think one challenge that I see particularly in the state of Florida has been the threat of preemption. It makes it very difficult to approach local government to try to push progressive policies that would, help protect workers. Because as soon as we see progress made, sometimes it can feel like the very next year the legislature is going to preempt that progress, and so it can sometimes make it difficult to even bring policies to the negotiating table at the county level, because then sometimes they'll be like, it's just going to go away next year. They're just going to knock it down. We're seeing that conversation playing out in real time in Miami-Dade, where they're trying to get a county legislation to help protect workers from heat. And so there's already that concern that the legislature is going to move that next year. And so, we're hoping to push for similar protections.
How can local residents support or get involved with your organization?
Yeah, so I would say if you're at a workplace that does have a union, join the union. Go to the meetings, support those meetings, and find organizations that share your values, and become a part of it. Be a part of that work. There's a lot of grassroots organizations pushing for issues ranging from gun control, climate justice, environmental justice, workers' rights. Really, sites like mobilize.us, for instance, will often have lists of upcoming local meetings that people can join, and also, Facebook events. I know it's hard to navigate sometimes, but there's always a lot going on in the community and people who are begging for community members to plug in. But a lot of the times when it comes to that intersection we've been talking about, when it comes to workers' rights and environmental justice, it's like the unions are so often the places that can get those protections codified in the absence of regulation to protect people.
Are there any annual events or campaigns they should know about?
Yeah, we have our annual art show that comes up in December every year. Tune in for that. It's a way that we can recognize the organizations that we've been working with, well as giving some of the context for workers' rights in Central Florida and throughout the state, where we recognize both who have been leading, who are some of our champions and heroes in the work, and we also give out a Scrooge Award for who have been some of the employers that have been advancing some of this injustice that we've been seeing.
How does the Central Florida Jobs for Justice work with other organizations, governmental bodies, or industries to affect change?
So what we do is we start with the workers, right? We start by talking to workers who have issues, whether it be there's pay being withheld, or for instance, where as we're recording this right now, there's a hurricane that's set to land in West Florida in 48 hours. We put out a survey that asks people, are you being asked to go into work right now? What kind of protections are you being provided? What are you being afforded in this moment? So we can gather information like that and use that to see who are the organizations that are working with similarly affected communities, who are the partners that have relationships within government amongst other decision makers, and kind of finding out what it really is our recourse here, so we can plan campaigns that tie in the affected parties, organizations and groups that have that kind of leverage or existing relationships, and then oftentimes champions as well, who are elected officials or people who work within government that can give us some of that inside scoop and help us build the like a pathway to victory, so to speak, for policy battles that we engage in.
What are some small everyday actions that viewers can take to support both workers' rights and climate justice?
I would say staying plugged in and having conversations with people in your everyday life about your values and what's happening around us to help other people stay informed. Because right now, we're in this phase where misinformation is really all over the place. We're having our even now, like the Google algorithms are based on your own browsing history. And so, having access to really clear information is so important. And so sometimes being that person that can cut through the noise it can make a really big difference in how people approach issues. A lot of this is done by like word of mouth. And so, having a well-informed person to tell you, like, this is what's going on, and kind of cut through some of that noise.
What future goals does Central Florida Jobs with Justice have, and how can we play a part in reaching them?
I would say that, building up stronger relationships between community organizing and organized labor that's at the heart of our mission. And so joining our individual membership is one way that really anyone from the community who shares these values can get involved. And so checking out cfjwj.org is one place you can find out how to get involved, and become a part of this work.
You mentioned that you had some work that you were doing in Miami on the heat stress that's going on. I'm going to give you a situation, and I would like for you to share with us what is happening there, how are you getting involved, and what are the solutions you're looking at?
For context, there's an organization. It's both We Count, and they're kind of leading on it, as well as a number of other worker-based organizations in Miami-Dade that have been organizing amongst agricultural and construction workers who work mostly outdoors, of course, and are lacking a lot of those protections from the heat. Under U.S. law right now, OSHA does not have a heat standard for protections that employers are required to provide their employees with. And so there have been rising cases of heat stroke. In fact, there was an agricultural worker who passed away recently while they were working in the field. We have done a study here of workers in Central Florida. After seeing a lot of that work and working with the Farm Workers Association of Florida, trying to pass statewide legislation to provide heat protections has been an ongoing effort for the better part of 10 years in Florida. And so there has been a strategy to approach that at the local level. And so that's what We Count has been doing, is trying to work amongst workers who are faced with that issue. And that's their lived reality every day, to build power amongst workers outdoors. But unfortunately, in the negotiating process, they were forced to make it a protection that would only apply to construction and agricultural. And so here in Central Florida, inspired by that vision, we're trying to do something similar, building up amongst the workers that we've been talking to, both construction, outdoor, and which would be 23+% of Florida's workforce in general. So it's a lot of people. And so another thing that we have found is that it's 25 days a year where Florida has an extreme heat index, temperatures of over 100 degrees. We also saw that about 30% of the people that we talk to are reporting that they have inadequate access to water in the workplace. And additionally, 44% have reported that they have inadequate break times. And so, they're just constantly being exposed to the extreme heat. Half of the respondents reported that they have little to no access to shade while on the job. And then I think one of the more striking facts about this was that over 60% of the workers that we surveyed here in Central Florida reported that they get little to no training or education around the impacts of extreme heat on the body, and ways to mitigate that, and the signs of heat stress. That's something that we're working with organizations that are doing some of that training, like the Farm Workers Association of Florida, to be able to apply that to different workforces. Thinking about communication workers who, even if they're not outdoors, sometimes have to go into attics that can actually be even hotter than it is outside, but also have to work running the cable lines outside of people's houses, for instance. And so, the context of that work is a little bit different than a farm worker, for instance. And, mechanical workers who are outdoors on hot asphalt, for instance, as well. So there's like different ways that different workers are exposed to extreme heat. But one thing that many of them have in common is that they don't have protections, and that their employers are not voluntarily taking the steps to provide those protections, which is pretty commonplace in the United States, particularly in Florida, where we have a very lax regulatory environment. And so, that's the strategy that's being pushed in Miami-Dade, is to try to get county level legislation. And we're hoping to organize amongst workplaces here, and see if there is potential to get protections for workers here in Orange County as well.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yeah, if you are in a workplace that has a union, join it. Be as involved as you can in your community, and come out and talk to your commissioners regularly. Your local representatives. It's their job to hear from you and to legislate on your behalf. And so, you have champions like Emily Bonilla who invite feedback from their communities, and occasionally, sometimes you just got to keep being that squeaky wheel. So, yeah, thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you for being here.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for joining us and sharing this information.
Definitely.
If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe to our channel and follow our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter accounts.